Is this the dagger?
Illegal substitution, too many men on the field, Saskatchewan.
Gizmo has a block and the sideline. He has not stepped out. He may go all the way. He needs one block and he'll do it easily.
Promise Mess I wouldn't do this.
McDavid stops up. What a move. Shoots. Scores!
Hey, everybody, calm down, calm down. The elk, the herd, is a little disgruntled. We'll get to that in just a moment. Welcome to Podcast 83 on Season 3 of The Outsiders, which is powered by the Macintosh Group at Remax River City. My name is Bryn Griffiths. He's Robin Brownlee. Hey, Robin, how you doing?
I'm terrific. Best day of my life, pal.
Well, look who's joining us today from CBC Radio in Edmonton. Very popular morning host, Mark Connolly. Marco, how you doing?
Guys.
Doing
Great.
good?
Good to talk to you. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. This is great. Before we start talking about sports and everything here, let's talk about your morning show on CBC in Edmonton, because you have absolutely surged and you do a great job with that show. You must be having a lot of fun.
You know, Bren, it's been 8 years now. I started in the fall of 2013. I officially got the job, I think, in December, actually, of that year. And it kind of surprises me how much I love it because I did radio early in my career. And then for about almost 25 years, I was a television sports reporter. And then I did a little bit of anchoring the news on TV, which I absolutely hated. For 3 years, I did it because what it is you're reading the teleprompter. Even though I might have written a lot of that, there was very little room to chit chat and talk and all that sort of stuff and go off the cuff, so to speak.
Right.
But then I started doing the morning show and I filled in that first week. And my wife, Allison, said, "So how's it feel? How are you going?" I said to her, "Oh, this fits me perfectly. I love it. This just feels like I'm ready to go." Because, when you're a sportscaster and you guys would know, having both done sort of multimedia, even though, Robin was a newspaper guy for the most part, he's had to do a bit of radio here and that kind of thing. There's all kinds of different things you have to master, whether it's, basically you got to do the interviews, you've got to write it up in some form, you've got to present it, you've got all these different things. And of course, when you're on a radio morning show, all those things come into effect. So I've done a lot of those things. So when I got into that job, it fit me like a glove. And, we had a really good team that was already there when I came on board. And I think maybe I was the last ingredient to help us, go to another level. And yeah, we were number one within 15 months and we've hovered around there ever since. So I don't think we've even in a week, we've dropped below 3. So it's usually 1 or 2 and we're battling with a lot of really good radio stations in this city. It's competitive. It's a very competitive market, as you would know, Brent.
Oh yeah.
Well, I started listening to the show quite a while ago, Mark, and, I always thought of you first and foremost as a sports guy, but I mean, you developed some reach out there. I know that firsthand, your show, and you were kind enough on a couple of occasions, to do some stuff with a Ronnie Lowe or other people in helping us with that Hockey Helps the Homeless for the mustard seed. And
right. Great project.
Yeah, I heard it I heard it here, I heard it there, and that's always, that was great for what I was doing with the mustard seed. But talk a little bit about leaving the element that you came up with and away from the hardcore sports. It's an adjustment, and it's not always one a person can make. You got to have the interest. You also have to have the ability to do it.
Well, I did sports for a long time. And I think when I made the transition from sports to being a news anchor, actually, I was just ready. I was ready for that. I was ready to move out of sports. I'd done it from the time I think I was I was 20 years old as a broadcaster in one form or another, whether it was, when I first started in Fort McMurray and I did play-by-play of the oil barons up there, and then moving to K97 and CJCA, I did a little bit of sidelines for Brian Hall, which was a great experience for me.
So you didn't have to talk much.
I didn't have to say much at all. And then I worked a couple of years for ITV, which obviously turned into Global long after I left them, and then worked my way into CBC. So I'd done a bit of everything. And when I made the move, I said to the CBC, I'd be interested. They wanted me to be the news anchor. I said, I'd be interested, but I don't want to give up the Olympics. And they said, well, you can still do the Olympics if you do this job. So I was ready for a new challenge and to do something different. I mean, it turned out that was not news anchoring. I did not enjoy that very much. But when the morning show came up, it just sort of was really important to me because, I grew up in Edmonton. I like the community. I want to be part of, talking about, I'm a booster for Edmonton for sure. Everybody knows that. So I want to talk about the great things that are happening in Edmonton, but also critique the things about our city that may not be up to snuff. So we got to examine those sort of things, and we get a chance to do that on my show. So I enjoy that.
I think frequently this is misunderstood by a lot of people. I've seen a few sports guys, more than people would even imagine, who've made the flip from sports to news, because sports is, as I've often said, is the toy department of life, right? For the most part. And we all care about what's going on with the governments. We all care what's going on in the community. We care about the other stuff too. We just don't talk about it. And then you get this opportunity to go from sports, which is pretty narrow focused, to talking about what really interests you. And there's way more than just sports that interests all of us. And you get a chance to do that and have fun with it.
I think the other thing for me too was that I was never like a stats guy. I had lots of friends who were totally into sports, and they would be quoting things to me, and I'd be like, oh, okay. I looked up the information that I needed when I was doing a story. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we know there's lots of guys in this town that could have instant recall about a game that happened in, 1998 when the Oilers were up 3-2.
Bob Stauffer.
I was there. Bob is great at that.
Encyclopedia.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing for the kind of show he does. That works really, really well for him. But for me, I was more of a story guy. So what are the elements of this story, and how can I bring those elements together to make it a really interesting story for even people who weren't that into sports? So that style of me being a reporter kind of worked for me moving into this venue.
Mark, we got a ton of stuff to cover, but I do want to ask you something, and we didn't really talk about this before you came on. Sports coverage today, be it radio, be it online, which is a huge factor now that wasn't as big a factor even a decade ago. Biggest change for you in the approach of the way all sports are covered? For me, it's the immediacy. You essentially can break a story on Twitter in 2 seconds. What's the biggest shift that you've seen over the last decade, say?
To me, it's been the specialization of all these reporters who they dig into the minutia, including the statistics of their sport. And they're really good at becoming an analyst of the sport. So you see guys like Darren Dreger, who we knew here as a reporter and a sports anchor for A Channel, recreating himself as an insider of the NHL. And he does a fantastic job at it because he's got the presentation skills, but he also has the contacts. So he digs into that really deeply, and they do it on a national basis. So they've got connections with every team, unlike where you had a beat reporter, say, for back in the day, the Eskimos, now the Elks or the Oilers. They would be the ones that were plugged into everything that was happening and had that access. Now it's other people who are a little bit further away from the team. They get access from different routes. So it's that specialization that I see that is a little bit different. And the minutia, which sometimes I find boring, and also kind of like, we really need to talk about this specific thing about the third line and their entries into the blue line. I mean, come on.
Mark, let me ask you this too, and maybe I'm more making a statement than asking a question, because I definitely have thoughts on it. It seems to me a lot of the old journalistic rules are out the window, and just the way I phrase that probably lets you know where I'm going. Now it's the hot take. It's you might not even be able to prove what you're saying when you're saying it or typing it or throwing it out there. You'll get to that later. There's no editor saying you've got to spend all afternoon making phone calls to make sure you're right about this. It's almost hot take, and if it's not right, worry about it later. That's not the way it used to happen.
I don't think they worry about it later. I don't think they care. It's like it's put out there into the universe, and it doesn't really matter. I agree with you on that one. I've heard people say to me, "Hey, I heard this," and I'd say, "Where'd you hear it?" And then they hear a convoluted story about third hand and fourth hand. And I say, "Well," and people ask me about sometimes things you think you know and things you actually know for sure. So people say, "Hey, have you heard such and such?" And I'm like, "Well, I've heard that. People have said that, but I can't say that it's true because I don't know for sure." I mean, you'd have to really dig into some of these things and have those great connections, of course, to verify things. But you're right. I think people do not verify. Now, CBC has a standard, 2 sources, and this is for news, obviously, and what it would apply to sports as well. So we cannot go with a story from one source. Like, it just doesn't happen. And I think that happens in sports a lot. And there is this rush to get it on the air or to get it on social media and be the first. And that has always been, obviously as reporters, you always want to be the first. That's kind of a kudo, right? But I think there can be a rush to that.
It's got to frustrate you because we're old-time guys in a lot of ways, right? So to me,
that's
it's
right,
not
Brandon.
To me, yes, that's right. It's this just handed me this bulletin. The thing that bothers me more than anything is I've never been a get it out there first kind of guy. I've been a want to get it out correctly before anything. But now with social media, it's there's this rush to get it out there in like a nanosecond, the moment you hear something, whether it's correct or not. And that really does bother me. It's got to bother you, too, when you see that kind of stuff happening. And it happens all the time.
Yeah, it does. And some things are really wrong. And they can, these are people you're talking about. So, it can affect when things are wrong. It can affect people. The one thing I will say that I'm also don't miss from covering sports is basically if you want to call it the corporatization of the sport. So the Oilers, for instance, control their message very tightly. You can't get in there to get the stories that we used to be able to get when we used to be able to sit down next to a player and chat with them for 15 minutes just about stuff. And then something would come up and you go, "Oh, I never knew that about you. Can we chat about that?" And then you would get that story and it would be different, right? And
that's a great point because, and Robin and I talked about this a while ago, Jim Matheson, Hall of Famer, great writer, but he was the kind of around the corner kind of guy. He would find out his story and he would move away from the scrum and he would take whoever and then go around the corner into the quiet part of the locker room and say, "Hey, tell me about this." And he would always get great stories. Terry Jones, Cam Cole. We could list a bunch of guys that we know that do it that way. Now that we've moved into this new world of the new Zoom world where everything is just provided for us on a screen, you just don't have that relationship. And part of the fun for me was having this relationship with players where you knew a little bit more than just what you had to report. That's completely gone now. And older broadcasters and older writers, I think, are getting burned more because we miss that. I miss that. Have you noticed that?
Oh, for sure. And, there was also a respect of, if somebody did have somebody off to the side, you weren't going to go up there and stick your mic in.
Correct.
Happened all the time where there's certain people in the media who basically were just mic stands. They're holding the mic and they'd get everything that you were getting because you were asking the question. That used to make me mad. One thing that I do like, though, about the new, I guess if you want to call it generation, is that it's a lot more diverse, right? We're 3 old guys right here, 3 old white guys, right? Now you have a greater diversity of people of color, and you've got a lot more women who are part of it. You've got people from different backgrounds. And I think that's really important because the people who we're broadcasting to, or narrowcasting, depending on what it is, they come from all walks of life as well. And they want to see people that look like them on the TV, on the radio. And I think it's become much more important to do that. And you have a lot more people who have the skills to do it from all kinds of different backgrounds.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I want to end this Statler and Waldorf segment.
You'll have to Google that.
I do miss some of the old ways it was done. And in this way, now it's all, even if we get out of the Zoom era and we can actually start getting within 3 feet of the people that are covered again, it's all scrum. It's you get one shot. Everybody in a big room gets to ask the same question. The people with experience, the people who have built trust over the years, where a player can say, you know what, call me at home later. And now you have a media relations guy in your face. Why you calling so-and-so? Well, let's see. He's an adult and he gave me his phone number. If he didn't want me to have it, I wouldn't have it. Now it's sort of, yes, it evens the playing field, but I don't know that the playing field should necessarily be even. When I got here, it was like, I'd look at Matty work the room and the stuff he would get because he was Jim Matheson was remarkable. I don't want everybody on the same playing field.
No, I agree that is a disadvantage to the sports media, but that is partly, as we said, the sports business clamping down. They want to control the message, right? Yeah. The problem is when you try to control the message, it becomes very convoluted and it becomes wrong. So then you get caught in a lie from their point of view. And it's like, well, you're your own worst enemy sometime. The other part of that I don't like is when you've got something happening in the greater sort of world and you want to talk about that. They don't want you to talk about that. They don't want you to get into it. Oh, don't ask them that. Don't ask them this. It's like, you don't control what I ask or what I don't ask, even though they'd like to.
Let's talk about the Olympics. There's been a bit of a discussion over the past 7 days, mostly coming out of the U.S., about the potential for a boycott of the Olympics in Beijing coming up this early spring or late winter. Boycotts, when I think of them, I think of obviously 1980, and I believe it was 84 in Los Angeles. Yes. I just don't think that they work. You've covered how many Olympics?
11.
Do you think they work?
I don't think they work. I think they just punish the athletes. If you were to try to boycott the Beijing Winter Olympics coming up in February, it's not going to punish China. It's going to punish your own athletes who can't go to the Olympics. I think, and I agree, I can't remember who I saw put this out there, said, let them go to China and let their voices be heard because they'll never get a bigger stage in the world than at the Olympics. I think the IOC, which, now I have to say, when you go to the Olympics, I would call myself a collaborator because, I am part of the CBC crew. There's certain rules that you follow when you're a broadcaster broadcasting something like the Olympics, just as there are with Hockey Night in Canada. You can call yourself a journalist, but you know what side your bread is buttered on. So there's certain rules you have to follow when you are part of that. So I realize that. But I will say the IOC historically is corrupt, and they are not going to do anything against Beijing or even complain about it. I mean, you look at this, the story about the tennis player. Yep. Her name's, I think, Feng Shuai. She has been missing, and the IOC said, the president said, I had a chat with her, and so everything seems fine, which, nobody believes. Nobody believes that. So I think that I don't think a boycott would work, and I think there's many more things you can do that'd be more effective. But unfortunately, like the World Tennis Association basically said they're not going back to China while this is going on, that they've got to clear that up. That is going to be a very costly thing for them to do. And I think it is the right thing, but it's going to cost them a lot of dough. That's the first volley, I guess we could say, right? There you go. Yeah.
So many things over the years. And the one thing that experience provides is context, and whether that's a sports reporter who's been around for a while or a government official who's been around for a while, things change. I love the Olympics, the idea of the Olympics. I grew up at a time when flipping on the TV and seeing athletics being performed from a different country was still a big deal. The world's a lot smaller place now, Mark. It's not a big deal to see athletes from pick a country. The sight of it, the pomp and the circumstance of it, I think is lost because you can get on a Zoom call now with somebody in China. You can get on a Zoom call with somebody in South Africa. It's not, wow, you actually, does it need to change to go ahead in a meaningful way? Because right now, to me, the Olympics look like a couple things. A huge expense to the country that hosts them for no good reason, given the way the world economy is right now. And it lacks a lot of what made it great in the first place. And like I say, that's the wow factor.
Well, I think first, number one, speaking to the expense of it, I agree. And there's all kinds of proposals to try to lessen that, where you would say you would not require a host city to build out all this different infrastructure, right? Where you could maybe rotate it between cities that already have something that works for them. So go back to different cities that already have the infrastructure in place, and that would make sense. As for the wow factor, I think it's still there because I think it is every 2 years now, alternating winter to summer. It's a gathering of the highest caliber of athletes in the world. Now, even though you're right, the world seems like a smaller place because so much is accessible online, you still only have this happening, every 4 years for your summer athletes that you're going to see the best in the world. So I don't think that's affected by it. I mean, it's great when you see, say, a hometown woman like Kelsey Mitchell win a gold medal in cycling, right? It's pretty exciting to watch that live, and it's coming across. I think it was in the evening here on a Saturday night when she won that. A lot of the stuff that was won in the middle of the night because it was in Tokyo at the last Olympics. But I think that excitement is still there for Canadians and others around the globe.
This goes a long way back. It might even go back to Mayor Bill Smith in Edmonton, who was one who was pushing to have Edmonton and Calgary do a combined bid for a Winter Olympics because we had, between the two cities, everything. The only thing we didn't have was a bullet train between the two cities. They could have easily figured that out. Do you see that as being a possibility because it's a money saver? Vancouver just need to, tweak their facilities a little bit. I do realize that there's the politics of Quebec City might want to hold Winter Olympics, and because they are in Quebec, they might get a shot at it. But do you ever see us going to more of a model where two cities like Edmonton and Calgary could host something like a Winter Olympics and do a shared cost?
I think so. I think that it would work great. I think the political opposition to it would be huge. You saw what happened when they had the referendum in Calgary and people voted down a Winter Olympics, which I thought made a lot of sense for Calgary. But I think that the price of it is a big mitigating factor. So if it costs a lot of money, people are not going to want to do it. But if you look at, the facilities we have between Edmonton and Calgary, I think it would make a lot of sense. And so I think it'd be a great idea.
Do we need to tweak, change, or completely revamp the structure, the IOC, and everything that isn't actually on the field of competition? Is it a tweak? Is it an overhaul? What do you see? Things change, and this, to me, the structure that's in place, the infrastructure for the Olympics, seems like this monolithic, old, slow-moving entity.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is, it is a mess, right? And you can, there's all kinds of documentaries and books you can read about the corruption of the IOC and how it works, the money flowing through there. And I think that the changes they have made have been incremental. In other words, they're like, okay, we're going to move this around here so it doesn't look as bad. But I don't think it's focused on the athletes. It's all about the people who are involved and how it works for them and how the money flows to them. I mean, the IOC makes a lot of money. They host the Olympics and they hardly spend any money at the host country. They're reaping all the benefits from it, and not much of it goes back to the athletes. I mean, it's a little bit, but yeah, I mean, the IOC, I mean, but who tears it down, right? Yeah. You've got to have a grassroots sort of swelling of local Olympic committees to push back against the IOC and say, no, this has got to change. We're not going to be a part of it.
Hey, a last one on the Olympics before we move on to a couple of other things here. I want to talk to you about some of your favorite Olympic experiences and things that surprised you, because Jamie Campbell, good friend of ours at Sportsnet, I'll never forget the experience he had in 2010 at the games in Vancouver, where he was in the right place at the right time to call the right medals. it just seemed like everything was clicking for him. And chatting with him during those Olympics, he says, I just can't believe I was there for that, or I can't believe I called that. I didn't see that coming. You've had the experience with Summer and Winter Olympics. Cycling for the most part, though, in the summer, and in the winter was a bobsleigh?
Yeah.
So anything come out of there that just, and the whole experiences that you've been through that just really stand out for you?
So many. I mean, I have so many great memories because, I mean, I remember the day that I got the call. And, I worked in Edmonton as a local sportscaster, and I'd done some work on the Canada Winter Games up in Grand Prairie in 1995. And so I had talked to some of the producers. You get to meet everybody from CBC Sports in Toronto, which is a big deal and that sort of thing. So I knew some of the people who worked there, and I kind of stuck my nose in and said, well, I don't know. I mean, are they looking for anybody at the Olympics? And they said, well, we'll give you a call. So in the fall of 95, I got a phone call. And they said, hey, Mark, got a call from CBC Sports, and they want to know, do you want to go to Atlanta for the Olympics? And I was standing in the newsroom. There's nobody, and I had the phone in my hand. I stood up and I went, can anybody see this? This is happening right now. I mean, that was exciting for me. And I got to go to Atlanta. It was a great experience. And then from there, I've had some really great experiences calling sports. Like in 98, I called bobsleigh for the first time at the Olympics, and Canada won a gold medal. And they won it in a tie. Now, the interesting thing about that was 5 minutes before we went to air, Clark Griffith was my color commentator, ex-bobsledder. I'm looking through all the things. I said to him, hey, have they ever tied? Like, what happens if they tie? Because, and he says, oh, yeah, they tied back in, I think he said 1968, and they did a count back. And whoever was leading after the third run got the gold medal. He says, but they've changed that. If they tie now, they both get the gold medal. I said, oh, okay. Good thing I asked, because they tied and they both got the gold medal. And then go forward 20 years to 2018, I called another tie in the men's bobsleigh, this time between Canada and Germany. And so it was, those kind of things are connected. And then 2004 in Athens, Lori-Ann Munzer wins a gold medal, the first Olympic gold for Canada in cycling. It's in the women's sprint competition. An Edmonton cyclist, somebody who I knew very well and I talked to many, many times. So it was thrilling to call her race. And then again, this year, I call another Edmonton cyclist winning another gold medal in the exact same event, Kelsey Mitchell. So those kind of coincidences are fun. But the things off the tube, in 2000, I was with Kurt Harnett.
Oh, boy.
So Kurt and I were in Sydney, which is one of the wonderful places in the world to go in Australia, if you ever get a chance to go. We had such a good time off the air. It was off the hook. It was such a fun place to be. And Kurt knew everybody. He just retired from cycling. He was so plugged into it. We were going to all the parties for all the different people and that kind of thing. The first night we were at the Moose, I think they call it the Moose Bar, which they'd renamed. It was on Darling Harbour at a big Moose. And that night, on the first day of the Olympics, Simon Whitfield had won the gold medal. So he was there with his gold medal, and every Canadian who was in town came to that bar, and it was just a fantastic experience and so cool. And I've had experiences like that where you're at the Olympics and you just run into people from Canada or from Edmonton, and it's just such an interesting, you just feel so lucky to be there and to be part of it. What's the best one then for you? Can you do that? It's tough. I think some of the best ones were for sure 2000 with Kurt and 2008 in China with Beijing, because Clara Hughes was my analyst in that one. And I covered Clara in my first Olympics in 96. She won the bronze medal, and I was there for that. And I had to take her back to the station, CBC, to be interviewed. And so I got to know her a little bit, and we became kind of friends ever since. We'd done the World Championships together, and then doing the Olympics was a lot of fun. So, I mean, such great opportunities for me. It was really, really, really good.
Now, before we move on, which we will, I'll just say this for the record. Going into what off the hook actually means is probably a podcast by itself, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Hey, and finally on the Olympic thing, you're not going this year. So you're going to miss that, I know. However, time marches on for all of us, right?
Yeah, I found out just about 3 weeks ago, actually. I hadn't heard back. I hadn't heard. Usually they send you a note and say, are you willing to be part of the crew again? You want to be part of it. And about 4 years ago, I used to go to Toronto to do bobsleigh all the time. And they said, you know what? I would go like 6 or 7 times a year. And they said, that's expensive for us to bring you to Toronto. We can't afford to do it anymore. We're going to get Mark Lee to do it. Mark was in Toronto. Even though he wasn't working for CBC anymore, he had been laid off. He was still a freelancer. They hired him to do it. So he started doing bobsleigh. In 2018, Mark did women's hockey at the Olympics. And so I got to do bobsleigh. But this time around, they're using the Hockey Night people from Sportsnet to do all the hockey. So they want Mark to do the bobsleigh. So they said to me, well, you won't be going. And I was surprised. Like, I'll admit, I was surprised. I didn't really see it coming. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I can accept this. I knew it would happen at some point or other. You hope that you walk out on your own terms and say, you know what? I've been there, done that, and that's okay. And in some ways, because of the way we're doing it, in other words, I wouldn't be going to Beijing anyway. I'd be flying to Toronto and working midnight to 8. It makes it a little softer landing.
Yeah.
I don't feel so bad about it because the experience of being in Toronto and doing the Tokyo Olympics was, not as great as being there, although calling the Kelsey Mitchell gold medal was fantastic. So you always hope to call a Canadian medal, and that's exciting. But so I don't feel so bad about it.
Let's talk about football because you are from the Edmonton area. This has been, and when we talk about the Canadian Football League, what has happened in Edmonton in, I'll say, the last 3 years is really beyond belief in my estimation. The whole thing from the Eskimos to the Elks, it's really hard to believe what's happened here in 3 years. Are you finding that a little difficult to believe as well?
I'm really disappointed. I grew up as an Eskimo fan. I was 12 years old when my dad got season tickets, and him and I went, despite the fact that I had 3 other brothers. We were the guys who liked football. So I was there in Clark Stadium as a child. And then when they flipped over to Commonwealth, we had season tickets there. And then when I became a sportscaster, I loved covering football. And I was, in my early part of my career, the Eskimos were winning Grey Cups, and that was exciting. And all through the years I actually worked a few games for CBC, CFL on CBC. So that was always exciting for me. Football was kind of one of my first loves. I knew Dwayne Mandrusiak because he was dating a girl I went to high school with, and they later got married. They had kids, and Allison Ward was a really good friend of mine in high school. And so I knew her mom, Shona, who worked in the office. So I had a lot of connections to that football club. And when they changed their name to the Elks, I was kind of like, you know what, that's probably time. It took me a while to get my head around it, but I kind of accepted that the reasons for it. And I thought, okay, Elks can work. Let's hope that works. The current regime of the team, and I am not close to it because I don't cover football on a daily basis, but just as an observer of an Edmontonian, really disappointed with the way they've approached things. I just seems to be they're disconnected from the community. When they fired Dwayne Mandrusiak a year short of him working 50 years there, I mean,
Come on. Yeah.
How does that work? Like, how do you come to that decision? And you think to yourself, who do you think you are? I just am flabbergasted by it. And I don't think they realize the level of sort of antipathy there is out in the community to a club that really relies on support from the community. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot of money to buy an Elks season ticket. It's not a huge investment. You only have to go to, 8 games a year, if that's how many, or 9 games a year, depending. So it's not a big investment there, and people are willing to do that, and they want to have a local team. Now, when you treat people like that and you see, I don't know, it's just an attitude that seems to be in that organization, and then it's reflected on the field. It was a terrible product on the field this year. So I'm disappointed.
Yeah. The thing is, the record is bad. Other teams have had bad records as well. I still consider myself an outsider, even though I've been here since 1989 now, but I'm not an Edmontonian born and bred. This was always from the outside, the Cadillac of franchises. And even if you take away the Grey Cup rings, which are substantial, the talk was from people who'd played here or who'd had a place here was talk about class. And I know that becomes a cliche in sports, class act, blah, blah, blah. But person after person led me to believe that. I saw it firsthand. When I'd get through with hockey, I'd come in, whether I was at the Journal or the Sun, and help with some coverage of football when my time off was up. And you'd talk to the people. And Dwayne Mandrusiak, I remember talking to him shortly after this happened. Dwayne Mandrusiak to this day will not say anything to put this club in a bad light. He lived for this club. He served it well for 49 years. But when that happens, to me, it overshadows the record. When you treat people, whether it's a Dwayne Mandrusiak or some things we've heard about the way they've treated other long-time employees there, it does not sit well with people who actually believe that the Eskimo way is more than a slogan.
I agree. And people had high expectations for the organization. I mean, they want to be part of something that has that stands for something more than winning and losing, because you can't guarantee wins and losses. There's no guarantee you're going to be a juggernaut every year, but you can do things right, if you know what I mean. You can do the right thing for people. And I feel like they have gotten away from that. And you've got to enter this with some humility. The CFL, I think, is in rougher shape now than it's been in quite some time. COVID really hurt them. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I love having a local team. I'm not an NFL guy. I don't have a team in the NFL. I guess I could just pick one. That's fine. But I don't live in the US. I don't live in a city. So yeah, I can just pick a team. I can cheer for them. That's fine. But this is your local team, and it's got to be beyond that, which brings up another actually subject, a pet peeve of mine, which I didn't get into with the Oilers, but a lot of teams, you know, they traffic on that sort of love of the team, and we're your team and we're the city's franchise, and support the team, support us because it's your local thing. And then they turn around, they'll do something else, and you go, well, what's that about? And they say, well, that's business. That's business.
You know what that deserves? That deserves one of these. Yeah. Anyway,
thank you.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in.
Well, isn't that true though? That happens all the time. That they just go to the hearts and minds. They tug at your heartstrings. They do these ceremonies that celebrate their players, and they do the thing. And then they, we're raising ticket prices $10. We're like, well, that's business. I don't know why the Oilers didn't come out of the COVID or different parts of thing and say, you know what, we're dropping prices. I think that would have gone over big.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing with the CFL too, Mark, and we all know this, if you liken it to real life, it's more of a paycheck to paycheck league, like the average Joe Joan out there, just trying to make it. COVID hurt them big. Sure, it hurt the NFL big too. But this is a place where even a franchise like Edmonton really felt that time without people in the stands. It's more than goodwill. It's good business to have that relationship with your fans. And if you're frankly going to treat some people like shit, that's not going to fly in the long term, is it?
It's not. And, the other thing, too, is you've got these players who are making, say, for the most part, between, say, $50,000 and $80,000. So, and then you've got some who are very well paid. That's great.
Right.
But you've got this big group who are making as much as the people in the stands, sometimes less. These are young men who are very approachable. They've had interesting stories. They come from backgrounds that are interesting. Some of them come to our country to pursue this dream they have, and that's a tough way to go. Like, you are in the minor leagues of football. You gotta feel for them in that way. They all had NFL dreams, or they wouldn't be pursuing this, right? And then you've got local kids who went through university, got drafted by the Elks, and they're going to be part of that team. There's all kinds of different stories there, and they can be very approachable in an era when you've got the big team, the Oilers, where the players are not so much approachable. You've got players making, even the lowest of the low are making I think is it 750,000? Is that the minimum?
That's the minimum. Yeah.
And it's funny because how we talk about it. That guy's only making 750,000 a year. Okay. He's making 20 times what most of the people can ever dream to make who are sitting in the stands. Right. So that you don't have that connection as much. Now we've done when I was in sports, this was often quoted to me about, when they did focus groups or surveys about what people wanted to hear. And the Oilers were up here at, say, 100, and then the football team was second, but it was down at 40. The Oilers were twice as big as the football team, and then everybody else was below, with the Bears and whatever, Olympic, anything like that. Yeah. So the Oilers are so number one that they can be arrogant about it. Not that they are. They're not arrogant. Or are they? I don't know.
Depends on the week.
I'm just saying. Right. So that's the opportunity then that the football club has, the Elks have, to make a connection with people. And they're blowing it right now.
Well, let's kind of put an exclamation mark on this and take a look at two events that happened at Commonwealth Stadium in the past 10 days, where the Canadian men's national soccer team put over 100,000 people in for two games. That's pretty impressive. Not only was it fun, it gave fans an opportunity to show that they're tough and to go out in crazy weather to support a sport that has been surging for a long time in terms of participation. But now we've got a good reason, because we're seeing a lot of those kids who have developed now actually not only succeeding, they're surging. It's fun to watch.
Absolutely. And there's another instance of being very smart with your pricing. I think the top price was it $35?
Yeah, 22 is on average, I think, is what it was.
Well, I think then you had most of them were at 22 with whatever the surcharge was, right? Oh, that's a fantastic price. And everybody's like, okay, yeah, let's go for $20. Yeah, we're going to go. And I knew lots of people who went and took their families and that sort of thing and rallied. I mean, having Alphonso Davies is kind of, the hometown kid is fantastic to have that as a promotion, but also the team seems like it's up and coming, and let's support this. I thought, great. I bet they'll get 40,000, but selling 52,000 for the second game, even though they didn't all show up, and just under 50 for the first game. That's fantastic. But the Edmonton Soccer Club, they should have been out there piggybacking on that. They should have been passing out a free ticket to everybody who walked through the door for their next game.
Yeah, that's an opportunity missed. However, we also understand there's politics involved. I don't know if the Canadian soccer folks were kind of keeping them arm's distance away from the event.
You might be right.
It's quite possible. And then really quickly, I'm starting to think about it. It came up in a conversation in the drive into work this morning, into the studio here. Me and the 15-year-old talking about the Battle of Alberta. And I said, we were talking because the Flames and the Oilers are right there at the top of the heap.
Yep.
And he said, but we've had this Battle of Alberta now for a long time. Why is this so special? And I said, look, Parker, it's real simple. When teams from Edmonton and Calgary play in the playoffs or Labor Day, there's something special about it. I said, it will eat people alive emotionally if we go through an Edmonton and Calgary playoff battle at the NHL level. I'm excited about it now, and we're just at the end of November. What about you?
I don't think we've ever had these two teams be really good and competitive against each other in the social media era.
No, we haven't. You're right.
It's been a while, right? I mean, back when the Flames went to the Cup final, then the Oilers went to the Cup final following them. Even at those times, the teams weren't that competitive against each other. They just happened to. I don't want to say they both got lucky, but they had fortunate draws and they made it through and they had great years. But there's been lots of times when one team has been way better than the other. And lately it's been the Flames better than the Oilers. Now that the Oilers are on the ascendancy, I'm actually surprised that the Flames are right there with them. But it's great because who do you love to hate more than Calgary? Nobody.
And it's good for the National Hockey League to have
absolutely
two good teams in Alberta. We're seeing a little bit of that too. Now we're getting the Battle of Florida. I mean, that's doesn't have the history that the Tim Hunter against all the Oilers days had. But if you're of a certain vintage, for a long there, you're going, yeah, Battle of Alberta. Nah, I don't think so. You can call it that. Both teams are bad, or one team is bad. You need those playoff games. Hey, they're not going to be what they once were because the rules have changed, but you can have great, intense hockey, and that would be a huge sell to actually have it in the league right now, wouldn't it?
Well, for sure. And I think that part of it is proximity. That's why you have those. You have two good teams in Florida, so it's kind of fun to have that battle. But in Alberta, you have so many people because we are so close, 3 hours away by car. You have lots of Edmontonians who live and work in Calgary and lots of Calgarians that live and work in Edmonton, then go back and forth, and you're there often. Like my son lives in Calgary, so I'm going down there all the time. So there's an actual rivalry between the cities that goes beyond sport. But sport is such a representation of that. And to be proud of your team and to put it in your other guy's face is so much fun.
Well, I lived almost 2 years in Calgary. I've lived most of my life and grew up and was born in Edmonton. And I always told people in Calgary, if I wasn't living here, I'd live up there. And I've told people here, if I wasn't living here, I'd probably be living down there, because I think we're very fortunate to have two cities of the stature of both Edmonton and Calgary. But the rivalry thing is a lot of fun. Listen, we've chewed up so much of your time here. This has been fantastic. We'll obviously have you back again, but great job. You continue to do a fabulous morning show on CBC Radio, and keep it up. And thanks for being with us today.
I appreciate it, guys. It was fun to talk about sports for a while.
The Outsiders is brought to you by the Macintosh Group at RE/MAX River City. So here we are. We're inching a little bit closer to Christmas, and you would think that in the Metro Edmonton market, things would be slowing down a little bit on the real estate front. But it's surprisingly very steady right now, which is great. Brent McIntosh is just back from his European junket where he was representing Canada, along with other RE/MAX agents from across Canada. They were over in Europe having some fun, but Brent's back now, and he's quite pleased with the way things are moving along. In fact, he just sold a home for a really good friend of mine, Chris, just recently. Took about 30 days to sell, and then Chris went on and bought another home in the market. So there is definitely something going on, and it is a positive. But if you are looking to sell your current home and maybe buy something new, then make sure you give them a call at 780-464-0075, or you can check them out online at macintoshgroup.ca. They'll start you off with a complimentary evaluation of your current home. There's no obligation at all, and certainly no deadline for this offer, but don't let the market pass you by. So both buyers and sellers are more than welcome to call the Macintosh Group at RE/MAX River City. You can do it directly. Once again, the phone number, 780-464-0075, or you can find them at macintoshgroup.ca and tell them the Outsider sent you. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the Outsiders for this week. Hey, before we get going, I gotta tell you, I went and sat in the seats. The Edmonton Oilers were entertaining the Chicago Blackhawks at Rogers Place on Saturday night. I usually don't notice this kind of stuff very often, Robin, but on this particular night, it was so unbelievably overpowering, I couldn't help but notice it. It was right in front of me, too. Right in front of me. I was at the one end. The Chicago Blackhawks, to me, are really not a very good hockey club right now. And obviously, they're going through a level of transition. It has been a crazy year for them in so many ways. A lot of it is self-induced. But I wanted to talk about, there was about a shift or a time space of about 4 minutes and 53 seconds, I think is what the official time was, where the Edmonton Oilers, with their third or fourth line, got into what I call the perfect cycle in the offensive zone. They had the Chicago Blackhawks reeling. Caleb Jones was the guy I really felt sorry for, because obviously he's back now playing where he played a little bit with the Edmonton Oilers. But the Edmonton Oilers' third and fourth line had the cycle going so spectacularly, the puck never left the Calgary zone, and you could see the Blackhawk players are getting more tired and more tired. The next thing you know, so after lines 3 and 4 did a perfect cycle, they decided to throw line 2 on, which, I thought was kind of interesting. That line never, ever let the puck get out of the Chicago zone. So now we had 3 perfect cycles with 3 lines. And then It was the Connor McDavid line stepping on, and I'm thinking there's no way Chicago's going to get out of here without a goal being scored against them. There were a couple of close calls, but 4 minutes and 53 seconds of what I called the perfect cycle, where you're able to throw all four lines out, and they just did it to perfection. It was really noticeable to me. Pretty powerful stuff.
Well, yeah, you know what? And I was thinking, I was smiling while I was watching it. In all my life, I have never seen a shift that long.
Yeah.
And B, I thought it would be really cool if somebody on the PA just fired up Sweet Georgia Brown and played it while the Oilers were looking like the Globetrotters. I tell you what, a lot of the Blackhawks, especially you mentioned Jones, to me, they looked as stiff-legged, and you'll remember this, as Grant Ledyard did when Todd Marchand zipped around him for the goal we all remember here in Edmonton. Your legs, no matter how well you're conditioned, aren't meant to work for 4 minutes plus at a National Hockey League pace. Yeah, that was a once and forever situation there.
Well, and I was also catching the broadcast, John Shorthouse and also John Garrett on Sportsnet Pacific. It was the Blackhawks playing in Vancouver, which the Blackhawks won, I'll point out. We could talk about the Vancouver Canucks. Maybe we might have to go to Vancouver here in the next week or so, because I think the shit is going to hit the fan very quickly. However, they did show a good chunk. They sped it up. They showed that 4 minute and 50 second that power of the Oilers, and they focused in on Caleb Jones, and they said that it's one of the longest recorded shifts in NHL history since they've been keeping tabs on that stuff. But it was pretty crazy. And the other thing I want to talk about too, and we touched on it with Mark Connolly, I'm really loving the fact that the Flames and the Oilers are doing what they're doing this season. The Calgary Flames are surprising a lot of people, not necessarily me. I don't know about you, but it's great to see both Alberta teams at the top of the heap in the Pacific, and it just makes me more excited about the playoffs, and we're not even at the U.S. Thanksgiving mark yet.
Yeah, you know what? I ended up in a lot of back and forth last season with some of our readers at Oilers Nation. They love to let you know when you're wrong. And when they brought Sutter back in, I thought after a short transition time that he would get things turned around and the Flames would become a force down the stretch. Well, they never really got it going, and it surprised me. Now, yes, there's been some changes, but this is more the look of the Calgary Flames team I expected when Sutter first came in. You know, again, tweak the lineup. It takes a while to get everybody on the same page as you, but yeah, this is good. You know what? This is good for Calgary. It's good for Edmonton. If they're the two best teams out west, that's perfect for hockey in Western Canada.
Also, driving into the Road 55 studio this morning, listening to the NHL Network on Sirius XM, and I can't remember who was talking, but the one thing that they proclaimed was right now the best team in the entire National Hockey League, and they did apologize to Carolina, but they said the best team right now is the Calgary Flames, and I thought to myself, they're playing really well. They're playing Sutter kind of hockey. They're playing defense first. They're getting great goaltending. And the guys who are the offensive talent guys have bought into the defense first thing. So, yes, they are playing exceptionally well. I also thought the Edmonton Oilers got to be loving this a little bit because it pushes them a little bit below the radar, although it's pretty hard to do when you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl lighting it up the way they are.
Yeah, and here another thing, too, and it's a sidebar. I mean, folks, we can stop talking about should the Edmonton Oilers be interested in Marc-Andre Fleury. A, he's not coming here. And B, what's wrong with Stuart Skinner and Mikko Koskinen? Somebody check their statistics. I'm not sold on Mikko Koskinen as a long-term guy. In fact, he is absolutely out of here when this year of his contract is done.
Or March, trade deadline.
And Mike Smith is getting old and creaky. But I tell you what I want to see for now, allowing that, you know, you can always change your mind. Forget about Marc-Andre Fleury. Let's see if Stuart Skinner can keep doing what he's doing. Marc-Andre Fleury is no spring chicken. He's not quite as old as Mike Smith, but he's not going to come here. Why would he at this point in his career? So let's worry about who's actually here and then take it from there. Because right now, goaltending is not a problem for the Edmonton Oilers. You don't need to be asking about what about this guy, what about that guy. No, what about the guys that are here now? They look okay to me.
And once again, when fans start throwing names out there, you got to do the first thing you have to do before you do anything else is go, does the math work? And for Marc-Andre Fleury, the math simply is not even looking at the Oilers cap situation. Unless they were absolutely to unload a few guys, the math does not work, so that wouldn't work. And as for what will happen when Mike Smith gets back, and I guess we could talk about what exactly is going on with Mike Smith, but, we'd be speculating. No sense in talking about that right now. But when Smith does get back, you know who's going. It won't be Mikko Koskinen. You tend to always keep your high-priced guys around, right? Now, Mikko, I think, is going to be, if they're going to ship him off, he's going to be of the two senior netminders. He'll be the guy that they'll try to ship off. Mm-hmm. But I see Skinner going back down to Bako as soon as Mike Smith is ready, regardless of how he plays. I just, I think I've been in meetings, actually, at the NHL level, behind the curtain, where you tend to always keep the expensive guy because you have to justify that contract. So we'll see whether or not the Oiler brass decides to go away from that. But Skinner has played fine in my books. I've been very impressed with him, quite frankly. Other than that one little gaffe in Detroit, but that gaffe where he coughed up the bad goal behind his own net, where he tried to bounce it off the wall. When did he play in Detroit last? That's the one advantage of a home team. They know exactly how their boards react. It just seemed to me it got caught.
I don't think the Oilers had even been in the new rink, have they?
Which one?
With COVID. I mean, have they been in Detroit since the Joe?
I'm pretty sure that they've had a couple of games in there, but okay. But nonetheless, it's still, if you're a young guy and you're playing in there, that would have been his first game in there. You're going to make those mistakes, right? You don't know how the glass plays. You don't know how the end boards play. So, hey, listen, all can be forgiven. Anything else you want to touch on before we bolt?
No, I think I'm good, and I will pat myself on the back for not going on and on. I think I've mentioned the media division of the 1990 street ball tournament more times when we haven't been recording than when we have. But it was nice to see Mark again and talk to him all these years after we waxed him on the court. But I won't mention that. Yeah,
don't bring that up. And I will not be cutting it. We don't. You know what? We don't do any editing on this show, just in case. Some people said, how much of the stuff that you talk about, how much do you edit? We don't really edit very much. You pretty much get the raw stuff from us, which is the way it should be.
It's nice of you to say that. I've got to say here and now, I do appreciate you editing, trying to edit all my questions down to under 4.5 minutes. But
nope, I don't do anything like that. We let people hear it the way we kind of record it. So that's it. Hey, before we get going here, make sure you check us out on Twitter. The handle's really simple. It's @Outsiders2020. We could use a few more followers, Robin, by the way. I know some people who check us out but aren't following us. So once again, @Outsiders2020. Also, make sure you tell your friends to subscribe or follow us. Our RSS feed is out there on any of your favorite ear candy sites like Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Deezer, etc., etc. And we're also on YouTube. And Robin records from his luxurious studio in Southwest Edmonton. Do you have a name for your studio? Like, is there a special name like Robin's Place?
No, but I may come up with it. And you know what? I may at some point slide downstairs into the office where, here's an original background where all the sports memorabilia is. But we'll see. Right now, it's just home base, Cameron Heights here in lovely Edmonton. It's all good.
And I record in the big room here at the Road 55 studio in downtown Edmonton. The big room is what I call it. I'm going to go and work in the big room, and Rob Lalisher kind of gets it and leaves me alone, which is really great. Your support, greatly appreciated. And also, we're always looking to add stuff to the show. So make sure that you keep in touch with us. We're getting bigger and better with your support. The amount of downloads lately has really surged. The past 2 to 3 months has really been noticeable. So make sure you keep retweeting to your buds. And that's about it. Robin, thanks for your time. And, of course, we'll talk to you next Monday. Looking forward to it.
Yep. Talk to you then, man.
Have fun storming the castle.